The sun cast long, harsh shadows across the parched land as Hannah Larson stared at her empty pantry with hollow eyes. Her trembling fingers brushed against the bare shelves, the wood worn smooth from years of use, now offering nothing but dust and broken promises. Bodie, California in 1878 was an unforgiving place for a woman alone. The gold rush town had attracted thousands of fortune seekers, leaving behind a harsh landscape of opportunity and desperation. Hannah had arrived 6 months earlier with her father, chasing rumors of gold and a fresh start after her mother's death. Now, with her father 2 weeks in the ground victim to a mining accident that had claimed 3 others, the 22-year-old faced starvation in the isolated cabin her father had built on the outskirts of town. Hannah's stomach cramped painfully as she closed the pantry door. Her dark auburn hair hung limp around her gaunt face, once vibrant green eyes now sunken and dull. The dress that had fit her perfectly when they'd arrived now hung loosely on her frame. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, having stretched the last of her meager provisions as far as possible. "I won't beg," she whispered to the empty cabin, her father's words echoing in her mind. Jasper Larson had been a proud man, teaching his daughter that Larsons solved their own problems. "We take care of ourselves," he'd always said. Even as he lay dying, he'd made her promise not to rely on charity. Hannah glanced at the piano in the corner, the only luxury they'd brought from their previous life in Boston. Her fingers itched to play, to lose herself in music, but she needed to conserve her strength. The thought of selling the instrument had crossed her mind repeatedly, but it was the last connection to her mother, who had taught her to play from the time she could reach the keys. Outside the window, the mountains loomed, indifferent to her suffering. In the distance, she could see a lone rider approaching on horseback, the figure growing larger against the backdrop of the setting sun. Hannah quickly moved away from the window, not wanting to be seen in her weakened state. Vincent Nash adjusted his Stetson against the glare of the setting sun as he guided his chestnut stallion along the familiar trail. At 28, he'd lived more lives than most men twice his age. 10 years of driving cattle across the untamed West had hardened his body and sharpened his senses, but beneath his weathered exterior beat a heart that couldn't ignore suffering. He'd noticed the Larson girl in town a few times before her father's death. Even in a rough mining settlement like Bodie, she'd stood out with her refined manners and quiet dignity. The news of Jasper Larson's death had spread quickly through town, and Vincent had watched from a distance as the daughter had stoically accepted condolences at the hastily arranged funeral. 2 weeks had passed, and no one had seen her since. That morning, Mrs. Peterson at the general store had mentioned her concern. "That poor Larson girl hasn't been in for supplies," she'd said while wrapping Vincent's purchases. "Stubborn as her father, I reckon. Won't accept help from anyone." Vincent had added flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, and sugar to his order without comment. Now, with saddlebags full of provisions, he approached the small cabin nestled against the foothills. He'd seen the curtain move as he approached and knew she was watching. Rather than ride directly to the door, he circled around to the back of the cabin. There was a small porch there, out of sight from the main window. Quickly, he arranged the supplies in a wooden crate he'd brought for the purpose. He added a note, "From a neighbor, no charity, just neighborly duty." He didn't sign his name. As Vincent mounted his horse and rode away, he felt a strange sensation in his chest. He'd never been one to interfere in others' business, preferring the solitary life of a cattleman. But something about Hannah Larson's proud, defiant stance at her father's funeral had stirred something within him. He told himself it was merely Christian duty that prompted his actions, nothing more. Hannah heard the sound of retreating hoofbeats and waited several minutes before cautiously opening her back door. The sight of the wooden crate nearly brought her to her knees. She read the note, crumpled it in her fist, then smoothed it out again. Pride warred with desperation as the scent of fresh bread wafted up from the crate. "No charity," she read aloud, her voice raspy from disuse. "Just neighborly duty." Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. She couldn't accept this. It went against everything her father had taught her. And yet, as another hunger pang twisted her stomach, she found herself carrying the crate inside. Just this once, she told herself, already calculating how she could repay this mysterious benefactor. Just to get back on my feet. She broke off a piece of bread and forced herself to eat slowly, savoring each bite. Tomorrow, she decided, she would go into town and find work. There had to be something she could do to earn her keep. Vincent didn't return to his ranch immediately. Instead, he rode into town, tying his horse outside the Red Dog Saloon. The establishment was already noisy with miners celebrating their day's findings or drowning their disappointments. "Nash," called Samuel Wilson, the town's banker, motioning him over. "Unusual to see you in town twice in one day." Vincent nodded curtly, ordering a whiskey from the bartender. "Had some business to attend to." Wilson leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Heard you asking about the Larson girl at the general store. Got your eye on her, do you?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Just concerned about a neighbor is all." "Pretty little thing," Wilson continued, ignoring Vincent's obvious discomfort. "Once she gets through mourning, she'll need a husband. Can't run that place alone. I might call on her myself in a month or so." Vincent's hand tightened around his glass. Wilson was a widow in his 50s, known for his sharp business practices. The thought of Hannah becoming his wife sent an unexpected surge of protectiveness through Vincent. "Seems a bit soon to be discussing courtship," Vincent said carefully. "The woman just lost her father." Wilson shrugged. "Life goes on, especially out here. No place for a woman alone." Vincent finished his drink in one swallow, nodded to Wilson, and left. The cool night air cleared his head as he mounted his horse. He'd done what he could for Hannah Larson. What happened next was none of his concern. Yet as he rode home under the vast expanse of stars, he couldn't stop thinking about her proud, stubborn determination, and what would become of her in a town like Bodie. Morning came with a harsh brilliance that made Hannah squint as she stepped outside her cabin for the first time in days. The food from the mysterious benefactor had restored some of her strength, though she still felt weak. She dressed in her best, a blue calico dress that had seen better days but was still presentable, and pinned her hair up neatly. The walk into town took longer than she remembered, each step an effort. By the time Bodie's Main Street came into view, her legs were trembling. Still, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin. She wouldn't show weakness. Not here. The town was already bustling with activity. Miners heading to their claims, shopkeepers sweeping their storefronts, women carrying baskets of laundry or groceries. Hannah felt eyes following her as she made her way toward the hotel. She'd heard they sometimes needed help with cleaning or laundry. "Miss Larson," a voice called, stopping her in her tracks. Hannah turned to see Mrs. Peterson waving from the door of the general store. The plump, motherly woman hurried over, concern etched on her face. "My dear, we've been so worried about you. How are you faring?" Hannah forced a smile. "I'm well, thank you, just looking for work, actually." Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened. "Work? But surely your father left you provided for." Hannah's cheeks burned. "I prefer to earn my keep." Mrs. Peterson nodded, though her expression remained doubtful. "Well, if it's work you're after, I heard Miss Sullivan at the schoolhouse needs someone to help with the younger children. The class has grown too large for her to manage alone." Hannah's heart lifted. Teaching children would be far preferable to scrubbing floors. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I'll inquire right away. As Hannah turned to leave, Mrs. Peterson caught her arm. Miss Larson, if you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Your father was well respected in this town. Hannah nodded stiffly. Thank you, but I'm managing just fine. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple wooden building with a small bell tower. Inside, Miss Sullivan, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, was attempting to teach arithmetic to a room full of children ranging from 5 to 15 years old. When Hannah entered, the room fell silent. Miss Sullivan looked up, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Miss Larson, isn't it? What can I do for you? Hannah explained her purpose, and Miss Sullivan's expression softened slightly. Can you read and cipher? She asked. Yes, madam. I attended school in Boston until I was 18. I can teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and music as well. Miss Sullivan's eyebrows rose. Music? We have no instruments here. I have a piano at my cabin, Hannah offered. Perhaps for special occasions the children could visit. A small smile touched Miss Sullivan's lips. You're hired, Miss Larson. $5 a month. You can start tomorrow. It wasn't much, but it would keep her from starving. Hannah thanked Miss Sullivan and left the schoolhouse with a lighter heart than she'd had in weeks. As she walked back through town, she noticed a tall figure emerging from the blacksmith shop. Even from a distance, she recognized him as the rider she'd seen approaching her cabin the day before. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair visible beneath his hat. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work and wide open spaces. Their eyes met across the dusty street, and Hannah felt a jolt of recognition. He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture both polite and reserved. She nodded in acknowledgement, then hurried on her way, uncomfortable with the possibility that this stranger might be her mysterious benefactor. Vincent watched Hannah Larson hurry away, noting that while she still looked too thin, there was more color in her cheeks today. He'd recognized the determination in her stride when he first spotted her walking toward town. She was looking for work, he guessed, respecting her resolve even as he worried it might be too soon for her weakened condition. That's the Larson girl, said the blacksmith, following Vincent's gaze. Heard she's looking for work in town. Proud one, just like her pa. Vincent nodded, paying for the horseshoes he'd come to collect. Nothing wrong with pride if you've got the strength to back it up. The blacksmith chuckled. True enough. You heading back to your ranch now? Got some business at the bank first, Vincent replied. In truth, he had no urgent business with Wilson, but he wanted to know if anyone else in town was looking out for Hannah Larson. The bank was quiet when Vincent entered, just Wilson and his clerk counting the day's deposits. Nash, Wilson greeted him. What brings you by? Cattle prices finally convince you to sell that herd of yours, Vincent shook his head. Just checking on some investments. Heard the Larson girl's looking for work in town. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. Indeed, Miss Sullivan hired her to help at the schoolhouse. $5 a month hardly seems adequate to maintain that cabin and feed herself. Teaching suits her better than scrubbing floors, Vincent observed. Wilson leaned forward. You seem mighty interested in the girl's welfare, Nash. Any particular reason? Vincent met the banker's gaze steadily. Just being neighborly. Well, neighbor, Wilson said with a thin smile. I've already had a word with Miss Sullivan about ensuring Miss Larson is properly compensated. The town can afford to pay her a fair wage. Vincent nodded, suspecting Wilson's sudden concern had more to do with his matrimonial aspirations than genuine charity. Good to hear. Town should look after its own. As he left the bank, Vincent spotted Hannah again, this time emerging from the general store with a small package. She looked tired, her steps slower than before, Without thinking, he changed direction to intercept her path. "Miss Larson," he said, removing his hat as he approached. "Vincent Nash. I believe we're neighbors of sorts. My ranch is about 5 miles west of your cabin." Hannah regarded him warily. "Mr. Nash, I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "No, madam, we haven't. I knew your father slightly crossed paths at the mining office a few times." She nodded, her expression guarded. "It's kind of you to introduce yourself, Mr. Nash, but I should be getting home before dark." Vincent glanced at the small package she carried. It wouldn't contain much, certainly not enough to sustain her until her first wages came in. "Miss Larson, I'm heading in your direction. Would you allow me to escort you? These roads can be dangerous for a lady alone." Hannah's green eyes flashed. "I've managed thus far, Mr. Nash, but I thank you for your concern." She started to walk past him, but Vincent gently caught her arm. "Miss Larson, Hannah," he said quietly, "there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered freely, with no expectations attached." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, Vincent thought he saw her defenses waver. Then she straightened her shoulders. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Nash, but Larsons stand on their own 2 feet." She pulled her arm free and continued walking, her back rigid. Vincent watched her go, admiration and frustration warring within him. He waited until she was a good distance ahead before mounting his horse and following at a discreet distance. He wouldn't intrude on her pride by offering help she'd clearly reject, but he could at least ensure she arrived home safely. Hannah was exhausted by the time her cabin came into view. The food she'd eaten the previous night had given her strength, but not nearly enough to compensate for weeks of near starvation. Her legs felt leaden, and spots danced before her eyes. She was so focused on putting one foot in front of the other that she didn't notice the 2 men until they stepped into her path. "Well, look here," said the taller of the 2, a scraggly bearded man with a scar running down his cheek. "If it ain't the Larson girl, all alone on this lonely road." Hannah clutched her package tighter, fear sending a rush of energy through her tired body. "Excuse me, gentlemen, but I need to get home." The second man, shorter but broader, moved to block her path. "What's your hurry, miss? We just want to be neighborly." "Heard you been having a rough time of it since your pa died." Hannah's heart pounded. "Please step aside." The taller man reached for her arm. "Now, that ain't very friendly. The lady asked you to step aside." Vincent Nash's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He sat atop his chestnut stallion, one hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. The 2 men exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. "We was just being friendly, Nash," the shorter one said. "Find your friendly elsewhere," Vincent replied coldly. "Miss Larson is under my protection." The taller man spat on the ground. "Didn't know you'd staked a claim, Nash. No offense intended." The men backed away, disappearing into the scrub brush alongside the road. Vincent dismounted and approached Hannah, who stood rigid, her face pale but composed. "Are you all right, Miss Larson?" She nodded stiffly. "I would have handled it." Vincent raised an eyebrow but didn't contradict her. "I've no doubt. Still, I hope you'll allow me to see you safely to your door. Those men might circle back once I'm gone." Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." They walked in silence, Vincent leading his horse. When they reached her cabin, Hannah turned to face him. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Nash." Her voice faltered as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She swayed slightly, and Vincent reached out to steady her. "Miss Larson, Hannah," she tried to pull away, but her legs gave out. Vincent caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her easily into his arms. "Put me down," she protested weakly. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Vincent said firmly, carrying her to the porch. "You're exhausted and half-starved." "Where's your key?" "In my pocket," she admitted, too weak to argue further. Vincent managed to retrieve the key without compromising her dignity, then carried her inside and set her gently on a chair. The cabin was neat but sparsely furnished. The piano in the corner caught his attention. It seemed oddly out of place in the frontier cabin. "When did you last eat?" he asked, moving to the small kitchen area. "This morning," she answered. "I had some of the bread from the crate." Vincent paused, meeting her eyes. "So you found it?" Hannah's lips tightened. "It was you?" "Yes." "I can't accept charity, Mr. Nash," Vincent sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "It wasn't charity, Miss Larson. It was one neighbor helping another through a tough time. Would you have let me starve if our situations were reversed?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "I'm going to make you something to eat," he said, opening the crate he'd left the day before. "You can consider it a loan if that eases your pride. Pay me back when you're able." Hannah watched as he efficiently built up the fire in her stove and began preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork. His movements were sure and practiced, surprisingly domestic for a man who looked more at home on the range than in a kitchen. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked, curiosity temporarily overriding her pride. Vincent smiled slightly. 10 years on cattle drives teaches a man to cook or starve. My mother taught me the basics before I left home at 18. "Where is home?" she asked. "Was Pennsylvania. Now it's my ranch west of here, the Rocking Inn." Hannah's eyes widened. "I've heard of it. They say you run the finest cattle in the territory." Vincent shrugged. "I do all right." As the food cooked, filling the cabin with savory aromas, Hannah felt strength returning to her limbs. "Mr. Nash, I appreciate your assistance today, but I want to be clear, I don't need saving. I've found employment in town and will manage on my own." Vincent nodded, dishing up a plate of beans. "I heard. Teaching at the schoolhouse suits you better than other work in town." "How did you hear that?" she asked, surprised. "Small town," he replied, setting the plate before her. "News travels fast." Hannah ate slowly, savoring each bite. Vincent busied himself tidying the kitchen, giving her privacy as she ate. "Miss Larson," he said eventually, "I understand your pride, respect it even. But there's a difference between independence and foolish stubbornness. Your father wouldn't want you to suffer needlessly." Hannah set down her fork, her eyes flashing. "You didn't know my father, Mr. Nash." "I knew him well enough to recognize the same stubborn pride in his daughter," Vincent countered. "And I know he'd want you safe and well, not starving in a cabin miles from town." Hannah was silent for a long moment. "Thank you for the meal, Mr. Nash, and for your escort home." "I won't forget either kindness." Vincent recognized the dismissal in her tone. He put on his hat and moved toward the door. "I'll bring more supplies in a few days." "That won't be necessary," she said firmly. Vincent met her gaze steadily. "It's a loan, Miss Larson, nothing more." Before she could argue further, he was gone. Hannah listened to the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance, then allowed herself to slump in the chair, exhaustion overwhelming her once more. Despite her protestations, she knew she wouldn't have made it through another week without help. The fact that the help had come from a man like Vincent Nash, handsome, capable, and clearly well off, only made her more determined to regain her independence quickly. She would repay him, every cent. And then she would owe him nothing. The following morning, Hannah awoke feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The substantial meal the night before had done wonders, and she dressed with renewed determination. Her first day teaching lay ahead, and she was determined to make a good impression. The walk to town seemed easier today, though she remained alert for the men who had accosted her the previous day. There was no sign of them, nor of Vincent Nash. At the schoolhouse, Miss Sullivan introduced her to the children, assigning her the youngest group. Hannah quickly discovered that managing a dozen energetic children between 5 and 8 years old was more challenging than she'd anticipated, but also more rewarding. By noon, when the children were released for their midday meal, she was exhausted but smiling. "You have a natural way with them," Miss Sullivan observed as they ate their own lunch in the quieted schoolroom. "Especially little Emma Jenkins. She hasn't spoken a word in class since her mother died last winter. Today she asked you a question." Hannah glanced at the stern older woman, surprised by the compliment. "Children respond to genuine interest. My mother always said that." Miss Sullivan nodded. "Your mother taught you well. Mr. Wilson stopped by this morning before class began. He's arranged for your salary to be increased to $8 a month in recognition of your education." Hannah's eyes widened. "That's very generous." "The town can afford it," Miss Sullivan replied, "and Wilson seems particularly invested in your welfare." Hannah shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the implication in Miss Sullivan's tone. Samuel Wilson had tipped his hat to her on several occasions in town, but she'd never exchanged more than polite greetings with the banker. "Mr. Wilson is merely being charitable," she said. Miss Sullivan's lips twitched. "Perhaps, though I suspect his interest may be more personal than professional. He's been a widower for 5 years now." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "I'm not looking for a husband, Miss Sullivan." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Few women have the luxury of such independence out here, Miss Larson. A woman alone faces many hardships." "I'm aware," Hannah replied, thinking of her near starvation and the men who had accosted her. "But I'll manage." The afternoon passed quickly, and when school dismissed for the day, Hannah found Samuel Wilson waiting outside, his expensive suit and gold watch chain marking him as one of the town's most prosperous citizens. "Miss Larson," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I hope your first day of teaching was satisfactory." "It was, Mr. Wilson. Thank you for arranging the increase in my wages. It's very generous." Wilson smiled, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. "Not at all. Bodie values education, and teachers with your qualifications are rare in these parts. May I escort you home? I have my buggy." Hannah hesitated. The thought of walking all the way back to her cabin was daunting after the long day, but accepting Wilson's offer seemed like encouraging attention she didn't want. "Thank you, but I enjoy the walk," she said finally. "The fresh air is invigorating after a day indoors." Wilson's smile dimmed slightly. "Perhaps another time, then. Good day, Miss Larson." As she watched him drive away, Hannah felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The increased salary would help tremendously, but she sensed it came with unspoken expectations. She was halfway home when she heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. Tensing, she turned to see Vincent Nash riding toward her, leading a second horse, a gentle-looking mare. "Miss Larson," he greeted her, dismounting. "I thought you might appreciate a ride home after your first day teaching." Hannah looked at the mare dubiously. "I haven't ridden in years, Mr. Nash. Daisy's gentle as they come," he assured her, "and the alternative is a long walk on tired feet." Hannah's pride warred with practicality. Her feet were indeed aching, and the thought of climbing onto the mare's back was tempting. "Did Mr. Wilson send you?" she asked suspiciously. Vincent's expression darkened momentarily. "No, why would you think that? He offered me a ride home as well." "And you refused him but might accept my offer?" Vincent asked, a hint of something like pleasure in his voice. Hannah lifted her chin. "I haven't accepted your offer yet, Mr. Nash." Vincent's lips twitched. "Fair enough. The offer stands regardless." After a moment's deliberation, Hannah stepped forward. "Very well, thank you." Vincent helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Hannah settled into the saddle, surprised at how natural it felt after so many years. "You ride well," Vincent observed as they set off at a leisurely pace. "My father taught me when I was young," she replied. "We had horses in Boston before." She trailed off, not wanting to discuss the financial reversals that had led them west. "Before you came west," Vincent finished for her. "What brought you and your father to Bodie?" Hannah hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling the truth. "Gold fever, like so many others. My father was a banker in Boston until the Panic of '73. We lost everything. He heard about the gold discoveries here and believed it was our chance to rebuild." Vincent nodded. "Many come west with similar dreams. Some find what they're looking for. And you, Mr. Nash, what brought you west?" A shadow passed over his face. "Restlessness, initially. After the war, Pennsylvania felt too small, too settled. I drove cattle from Texas up to Kansas first, then kept moving west. Found this territory suited me." "You fought in the war?" Hannah asked, surprised. He didn't seem old enough to have served in the Civil War. "Last year of it. Lied about my age to enlist. I was 16 when I joined up, 17 when it ended. Saw enough to know I didn't want to go back east afterward." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the rhythmic swaying of the horses soothing Hannah's tired muscles. "Miss Larson," Vincent said eventually, "I've been thinking about your situation. I have a proposition that might preserve your independence while ensuring you don't go hungry again." Hannah tensed. "What kind of proposition, Mr. Nash?" "A business arrangement," he clarified quickly. "I could use help with my accounts and correspondence. I'm not much for paperwork and the ranch is growing. If you could spare a few hours each week, I'd pay you fairly for your time." Hannah considered this. "You're offering me employment?" "Yes. No charity, just fair pay for honest work. You have education I lack, and I have need of those skills." It was a generous offer, and Hannah was tempted. The additional income would help her become truly self-sufficient more quickly. And yet, "Why are you doing this, Mr. Nash?" "Truly," Vincent met her gaze directly. "Because I admire your determination, Miss Larson, and because I know what it's like to be alone in the world, too proud to ask for help." The honesty in his blue eyes convinced her. "Very well, Mr. Nash. I accept your proposition on the condition that we maintain a strictly professional relationship." Something flashed in Vincent's eyes: amusement, disappointment, but he nodded. "Agreed. Can you start Saturday? I'll send Daisy for you in the morning." As they approached her cabin, Hannah felt a sense of anticipation she hadn't experienced in months. The teaching position, now the additional work for Vincent, perhaps she would build a life here after all. Vincent helped her dismount when they reached her cabin, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Hannah stepped back quickly, nodding her thanks. "Until Saturday, Mr. Nash." "Until Saturday, Miss Larson." As she watched him ride away, Hannah realized she was smiling. For the first time since her father's death, the future held promise rather than dread. The week passed in a blur of teaching and preparation. Hannah found she genuinely enjoyed working with the children, and the increased salary eased her immediate financial worries. She was able to purchase modest supplies at the general store, paying cash rather than accepting credit, her pride intact. Mrs. Peterson beamed at her across the counter. "You're looking much better, Miss Larson. Teaching agrees with you." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. It's rewarding work." "Mr. Wilson has been asking about you," the shopkeeper said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Says he's concerned about you living alone so far from town." Hannah sighed. "Mr. Wilson is very kind, but I assure you I'm managing quite well." Mrs. Peterson's expression turned serious. "Just be careful, dear. A woman alone faces many dangers, not least of which is a damaged reputation. If Mr. Wilson is calling on you, people will talk. Mr. Wilson is not calling on me, Hannah said firmly, and I'm quite capable of managing both my safety and my reputation. As she left the store, Hannah couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. She valued her independence, but Mrs. Peterson wasn't wrong. In a town like Bodie, a single woman living alone was subject to gossip and suspicion. Taking a second job with Vincent Nash would only add fuel to that fire. Still, she needed the income, and she found herself looking forward to Saturday with surprising eagerness. Saturday dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air. Hannah dressed carefully in her blue calico dress, pinning her hair up neatly. At precisely 9 o'clock, she heard hoofbeats outside and found Daisy tied to her porch rail, a note attached to the saddle. "Miss Larson, Daisy knows the way. I'll meet you at the ranch. VN." Hannah smiled at the mare's gentle brown eyes. "Well, Daisy, shall we go?" The ride to the rocking inn took just over half an hour. As the ranch came into view, Hannah caught her breath. It was larger and more prosperous than she'd imagined. A substantial main house built of sturdy logs stood surrounded by several outbuildings. Fenced pastures stretched in all directions, dotted with cattle. Several cowboys worked in a distant corral, breaking horses from the look of it. As she approached the main house, Vincent emerged, dressed in simpler clothes than she'd seen him in before, a blue work shirt and denims, rather than the more formal attire he wore to town. "Miss Larson," he greeted her, helping her dismount. "Welcome to the rocking inn." "It's impressive," she admitted. "I hadn't realized the scale of your operation." Pride flickered in his eyes. "Started with 30 head of cattle in this land 10 years ago. Now we're running close to 1,000 head and employing 12 men year-round, more during roundup." He led her inside, where Hannah was again surprised. The main room was spacious and well-appointed, with comfortable furniture, bookshelves lining one wall and large windows providing ample light. It was far from the Spartan bachelor quarters she'd expected. "My office is through here," Vincent said, leading her to a smaller room off the main living area. Unlike the orderly main room, this space was cluttered with papers, ledgers, and correspondence in various states of organization. "I see what you mean about needing help," Hannah said, surveying the chaos. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, looking slightly embarrassed. "I've never been one for paperwork. Prefer to be outdoors with the cattle or horses. But a business this size generates a fair amount of correspondence and record keeping." Hannah immediately began sorting through the nearest pile of papers. "You need a filing system, and regular bookkeeping, not whatever this is." Vincent's lips twitched. "That's why I hired you, Miss Larson. I know what needs doing, I just haven't found the time or inclination to do it." For the next several hours, Hannah lost herself in organizing Vincent's business affairs. She created filing systems for correspondence, organized purchase records, and began bringing order to the chaotic ledgers. Vincent worked alongside her, explaining aspects of the cattle business she didn't understand and answering questions about various transactions. At noon, he insisted they break for lunch, which his housekeeper, Mrs. Obregon, had prepared. The older Mexican woman greeted Hannah warmly, her dark eyes assessing. "It is good Mr. Nash finds someone to help with the papers," she said in accented English. "He works too much with the cattle, not enough with the numbers." Vincent smiled affectionately at the housekeeper. "Mrs. Obregon has been trying to civilize me for years." "A difficult task," the woman replied with a sniff, but her eyes twinkled. After lunch, they returned to work. By mid-afternoon, Hannah had made significant progress, bringing order to months of neglected paperwork. "You're a miracle worker," Vincent said as he reviewed the newly organized ledger. I can actually see where the money's going now." Hannah smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It's not so difficult once you establish a system. If you maintain it regularly, it won't become overwhelming again." "That's where you come in," Vincent replied. "I'd like you to come once a week if that suits your schedule. Say every Saturday." Hannah nodded. "That would be acceptable. What compensation did you have in mind?" They negotiated a fair wage, and Hannah felt a surge of satisfaction. Between teaching and this new position, she would be financially secure for the first time since her father's death. As the afternoon waned, Vincent insisted on showing her around the ranch. Hannah accepted, curious to see more of the operation. He led her to the stables first, introducing her to his prized horses. "This is Thunder," he said, stopping before a magnificent black stallion. "Best cutting horse I've ever owned." Hannah reached out to stroke the horse's velvety nose. "He's beautiful." "He knows it too," Vincent chuckled. Vainest creature on the ranch. They moved on to the cattle pens where several cowboys were working. The men tipped their hats respectfully to Hannah, though she caught curious glances exchanged. "Don't mind them," Vincent said quietly. "They don't see many ladies out here." "I imagine not," Hannah replied, suddenly conscious of how their companionship might appear to others. As if reading her thoughts, Vincent added, "Mrs. Obregon will always be present when you're working here. I wouldn't want your reputation compromised." Hannah appreciated his consideration. "Thank you, Mr. Nash." The sun was beginning to set when Vincent suggested they return to the house. "It's getting late. I should see you home before dark." Hannah nodded, though part of her was reluctant to leave. The day had been the most enjoyable she'd experienced in months. Vincent's company was easy and undemanding, his respect for her abilities genuine. As they rode back toward her cabin, the sunset painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Vincent broke the comfortable silence. "Miss Larson, Hannah," he said, using her given name for the first time. "I hope you don't find this arrangement uncomfortable in any way." Hannah glanced at him. "Why would I? Some might consider it improper for you to work for a single man." Hannah straightened in her saddle. "Some might also consider it improper for a woman to live alone or earn her own living." "I've never been overly concerned with others' opinions of my choices." Vincent smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. "I admire that about you." They rode in companionable silence until Hannah's cabin came into view. To her surprise, a buggy was parked outside and Samuel Wilson stood on her porch. Vincent's expression darkened. "Seems you have a visitor." Hannah's stomach tightened with apprehension. "So it seems." As they approached, Wilson turned, his eyes narrowing at the sight of them riding side by side in the twilight. "Miss Larson," he called, his voice overly cordial. "I was beginning to worry. It's nearly dark." Hannah dismounted without waiting for Vincent's assistance. "Mr. Wilson, this is unexpected." "I brought some supplies," Wilson said, gesturing to a crate similar to the one Vincent had left. "Thought you might need them living so far out." "That's very kind," Hannah said stiffly, "but unnecessary. I'm managing quite well." Wilson's gaze shifted to Vincent, who had dismounted and stood beside his horse, expression neutral but watchful. "Nash," Wilson acknowledged. "Didn't realize you and Miss Larson were acquainted." "Miss Larson has been helping me organize my business affairs," Vincent replied smoothly. "She has quite a head for numbers." Wilson's eyebrows rose. "Indeed. I wasn't aware you'd taken a second position, Miss Larson." "It's a recent arrangement," Hannah said, disliking the need to explain herself. An uncomfortable silence fell. Vincent cleared his throat. "I should be heading back." "Thank you for your assistance today, Miss Larson. Same time next Saturday?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. Nash." Vincent mounted his horse, nodded curtly to Wilson, and rode away. Hannah turned to the banker, who was watching her with a calculating expression. "Mr. Wilson, while I appreciate your concern, I must ask that you not call unannounced in the future. It's not proper." Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yet it's proper for you to spend the day alone with Nash at his ranch." Hannah's cheeks burned. "I was employed in a professional capacity, with his housekeeper present the entire time." Wilson stepped closer. "Hannah, may I call you Hannah? I'm concerned for you. A young, unmarried woman in your position is vulnerable to misunderstandings. There are those in town already talking about your relationship with Nash." "There is no relationship," Hannah said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, it's been a long day." Wilson picked up his hat from the porch rail. "Of course, but please accept the supplies. Consider it an advance on your salary if your pride demands it." Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, thank you." After Wilson left, Hannah carried the crate inside, feeling unsettled. Wilson's warning about town gossip concerning her and Vincent troubled her. She couldn't afford to lose her teaching position if her reputation was questioned. Yet as she prepared for bed, it was the memory of Vincent's smile and the easy companionship of their day together that lingered in her mind, not Wilson's thinly veiled warnings. The following weeks established a rhythm to Hannah's life. Weekdays were devoted to teaching, where she found increasing satisfaction as her young pupils progressed under her guidance. Saturdays were spent at the Rocking Inn, bringing order to Vincent's business affairs and, increasingly, enjoying his company. Their professional relationship gradually warmed into friendship. Hannah discovered that beneath Vincent's reserved exterior lay a thoughtful, intelligent man with unexpected depths. He'd read widely despite his limited formal education, and their conversations ranged from literature to politics to the future of the West. "You miss Boston?" he asked one Saturday as they shared lunch on the porch, taking advantage of the mild autumn weather. Hannah considered the question. "I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, the sense of permanence. But Boston was also confining in ways I didn't fully appreciate until I left." "How so?" "A woman's place was very clearly defined," she explained. "Here, despite the hardships, there's a certain freedom. Teaching was one of the few respectable occupations available to unmarried women in Boston. Here, necessity overrides convention." Vincent nodded. "The West shapes people differently. Strips away pretensions, forces you to confront who you truly are." "And who are you truly, Vincent Nash?" Hannah asked, surprising herself with the personal question. Vincent's blue eyes met hers, unusually serious. "Still figuring that out, I suppose. For years, I defined myself by what I was building this ranch, my herd. Now I'm wondering if there's more." The moment hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Hannah looked away first, suddenly conscious of how comfortable she'd become in his presence. "I should get back to those supply invoices," she said, rising from her chair. Vincent nodded, allowing the moment to pass. "Of course." In town, Hannah was aware of increased attention. Mrs. Peterson reported that her improved circumstances and weekly visits to the Nash ranch had become subjects of speculation. "Some say he's courting you," the shopkeeper said, watching Hannah's face closely. "Others think he's just being charitable." "Mr. Nash has employed me for my accounting skills," Hannah replied firmly. "Nothing more." Mrs. Peterson looked unconvinced. "And Mr. Wilson, he's made no secret of his interest in you." Hannah sighed. "Mr. Wilson is a respected member of the community, but I have no interest in remarrying." "Remarrying?" Mrs. Peterson echoed, surprised. Hannah blushed, realizing her slip. "I meant marrying. I have no interest in marrying." The shopkeeper's eyes narrowed, but she didn't press the issue. "Well, just be careful, dear. A woman's reputation is easily damaged in a town like this. That evening, alone in her cabin, Hannah pulled out the small wooden box she kept hidden beneath her bed. Inside lay documents she hadn't looked at in months: her marriage certificate and her husband's death notice. Jonathan Larson, her cousin from Philadelphia, according to the story she and her father had constructed upon arriving in Bodie. In reality, he had been her husband of barely a year before typhoid took him during their journey west. Her father had suggested the deception, fearing a young widow would attract unwanted attention in a mining town. Now the lie complicated her life in unexpected ways. If the truth came out, her reputation would indeed be damaged, not because she was a widow, but because she'd lied to the entire town. And then there was Vincent. Their growing friendship was becoming something more, at least for her. The thought of his reaction if he discovered her deception weighed heavily on her mind. The following Saturday, Hannah arrived at the Rocking Inn to find Vincent absent and Mrs. Obregon unusually reserved. Mr. Nash had business in town, the housekeeper explained. He said to tell you he is sorry and will return by noon. Hannah settled into the office, focusing on the correspondence that had accumulated during the week, but she found her thoughts drifting repeatedly to Vincent and the growing complications of her situation. When he finally arrived, it was past noon and his expression was troubled. "Hannah," he said, using her given name as he had increasingly in recent weeks, "I apologize for my absence. Something came up that required immediate attention." "Is everything all right?" Vincent hesitated. "Wilson came to see me this morning. He suggested my employment of you might be compromising your reputation in town." Hannah felt a chill. "I see. He implied that if I had honorable intentions toward you, I should declare them formally or terminate your employment." Hannah's cheeks burned with humiliation and anger. "Mr. Wilson has no right to dictate my employment or your intentions." "No, he doesn't," Vincent agreed, his jaw tight. "I told him as much." "And what did he say to that?" Vincent's expression darkened. "He suggested that, as a prominent citizen and school board member, he had a duty to ensure the moral character of Bodie's teachers was beyond reproach." The implication was clear. If Hannah continued working for Vincent, Wilson could use his influence to have her removed from her teaching position. "He's threatening my livelihood," she said quietly. Vincent nodded. "I believe so, yes." Hannah rose, pacing the small office. "This is precisely why I value my independence. The moment a woman depends on her own capabilities, men like Wilson feel compelled to control her choices." "Hannah," Vincent said gently, "I have no wish to add to your difficulties. If you feel it would be better to end our arrangement—" "No," Hannah interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I won't be intimidated by Wilson's threats. I need this income, and more importantly, I enjoy this work." Vincent's expression softened. "I'm glad to hear it. I've come to look forward to our Saturdays together." The admission hung between them, charged with meaning. Hannah met his gaze, seeing in his blue eyes a warmth that made her heart beat faster. "As have I," she admitted. Vincent took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "We should get to work. I have contracts that need reviewing before Monday." They worked side by side for several hours, the easy rhythm of their collaboration restored. Yet Hannah was conscious of a new tension between them, an awareness that had shifted from the professional to the personal. As evening approached, Vincent insisted on escorting her home as usual. They rode in companionable silence, the autumn sunset painting the landscape in golden hues. When they reached her cabin, Vincent dismounted to help her down. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, and when her feet touched the ground, he didn't immediately release her. "Hannah," he said, his voice lower than usual, Wilson wasn't entirely wrong. My intentions toward you have evolved beyond the professional. Hannah's heart thundered in her chest. Vincent, you don't need to respond, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know that if I call on you formally, it won't be because of Wilson's threats or concerns about your reputation. It will be because I've come to care for you deeply. Before she could respond, he released her, stepped back, and mounted his horse. Good night, Hannah. As she watched him ride away, Hannah felt a mixture of elation and dread. Vincent's admission of his feelings thrilled her, but the secret she carried felt heavier than ever. How could she accept his courtship while concealing her past? The decision plagued her through a sleepless night and into Sunday. By Monday morning, as she prepared for school, Hannah had resolved to tell Vincent the truth, whatever the consequences. Their relationship could never move forward honestly while she maintained her deception. But when she arrived at the schoolhouse, she found Miss Sullivan waiting with an unusually grave expression. Miss Larson, she said, the school board has called an emergency meeting this afternoon. Your presence is requested. Hannah's stomach dropped. What is this regarding? Miss Sullivan's lips tightened. I believe Mr. Wilson has raised certain concerns about propriety. Hannah straightened her spine. I see. Thank you for informing me. The morning passed in a blur of anxiety. Hannah focused on her pupils with determined cheerfulness, but her mind raced with possibilities. If the school board dismissed her, her financial independence would be severely compromised. More importantly, her reputation in town would be damaged, perhaps irreparably. At noon, as the children filed out for their midday meal, Hannah noticed Vincent standing outside the schoolhouse. Her heart leapt at the sight of him, then immediately sank as she realized what his presence might suggest to observers. Mr. Nash, she greeted him formally as she stepped outside. This is unexpected. Miss Larson, he replied, matching her formal tone. I heard about the board meeting. I came to offer my support. Hannah glanced around, noting several townspeople watching with undisguised interest. While I appreciate the gesture, your presence might only confirm Mr. Wilson's allegations. Vincent's jaw tightened. Wilson is using his position to pressure you because you've rejected his attentions. It's despicable. Nevertheless, Hannah said quietly, this is my battle to fight. Please go back to your ranch. I'll manage this. Vincent studied her face, then nodded reluctantly. As you wish, but if you need me, send word. I'll come immediately. The school board meeting was held in the town hall with Wilson presiding. 5 other board members, all men, sat alongside him. Hannah stood before them, conscious of her solitary position but determined not to show weakness. Miss Larson, Wilson began, his tone regretful but firm. Concerns have been raised about certain associations that might compromise your standing as a moral example to our children. What associations would those be, Mr. Wilson? Hannah asked, her voice steady. Wilson cleared his throat. Your weekly visits to the Nash ranch have become a subject of town gossip. While the board has no wish to interfere in private matters, when those matters affect the moral standing of our teachers, we must intervene. Hannah looked directly at each board member in turn. Gentlemen, I have been employed by Mr. Nash to organize his business accounts. I work in his office with his housekeeper present at all times. There has been nothing improper in our association. One of the board members, a storekeeper named Johnson, spoke up. Miss Larson, no one is suggesting impropriety on your part, but appearances matter in a position such as yours. I understand that, Hannah replied. However, I would ask the board to consider whether it's the appearance that concerns you, or the fact that I've sought financial independence through honest work. Wilson's eyes narrowed. What are you implying, Miss Larson? Hannah met his gaze directly. Only that if Mr. Nash were a married man, Or if I were working for Mrs. Peterson at the general store, I doubt my employment would be questioned." A murmur ran through the room. Another board member, a grizzled miner named Hawkins, chuckled. "She's got a point there, Wilson." Wilson's face reddened slightly. "The point remains that Miss Larson's association with Mr. Nash has become a topic of gossip, which undermines her authority with the children and their parents." "If I might speak," came a voice from the back of the room. Hannah turned to see Mrs. Peterson rising from her seat among the small crowd of spectators. "Mrs. Peterson," Wilson acknowledged, looking annoyed at the interruption. "This is a closed board meeting." "As the mother of 2 children in Miss Larson's class, I believe I have a right to speak," Mrs. Peterson replied firmly. "Miss Larson has been an exemplary teacher. My Emma has learned more in a few weeks under her guidance than in months previously. I speak for many parents when I say we value her skills far more than we concern ourselves with unfounded gossip." Several spectators nodded in agreement. Wilson's expression tightened. "The board appreciates your input, Mrs. Peterson. However, the decision remains ours." Hannah stood silently as the board members conferred in low voices. Finally, Wilson turned back to her. "Miss Larson, the board has decided to take no action at this time. However, we strongly advise you to consider how your personal associations might affect your professional standing in the community." It was a thinly veiled warning, but not the dismissal Hannah had feared. She nodded. "Thank you, gentlemen. I assure you my focus remains on providing the best possible education to the children of Bodie." As the meeting adjourned, Hannah found herself surrounded by supportive parents, many of whom had witnessed the proceedings. Mrs. Peterson squeezed her hand. "Don't you worry about Wilson," she whispered. "His pride's hurt because you've shown interest in Nash instead of him." Hannah blushed. "I haven't shown," Mrs. Peterson laughed. "My dear, you light up like a lantern whenever that man is mentioned. And he looks at you like you're water in the desert. The whole town sees it, whether you acknowledge it or not." As Hannah walked home, her emotions were mixed. Relief that she'd kept her position warred with anxiety about Wilson's continued opposition. And beneath it all ran a current of longing whenever she thought of Vincent. She was halfway home when she heard approaching hoofbeats. Turning, she saw Vincent riding toward her, his expression concerned. "Hannah," he called, dismounting quickly. "I heard about the meeting. Are you all right?" "News travels fast," she observed, but smiled to soften her words. "I'm fine. The board decided to take no action." Relief washed over Vincent's face. "Good. Wilson was overstepping." "He was," Hannah agreed, "but he wasn't entirely wrong about the gossip." Vincent's eyes met hers. "Does that bother you?" Hannah hesitated. "It's not the gossip itself, but what it represents. I came to Bodie seeking a fresh start, not new complications." "Am I a complication, Hannah?" Vincent asked quietly. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Hannah knew her answer would change everything. "Yes," she admitted finally, "but perhaps not an unwelcome one." Vincent's expression softened. "Would you allow me to call on you properly? No more pretense of business arrangements, though you're welcome to continue working for me if you wish. I want to court you, Hannah Larson, with honorable intentions." Hannah's heart raced. This was the moment she'd both longed for and dreaded. Vincent deserved the truth before their relationship progressed further. "There's something you should know first," she said, her voice suddenly unsteady. "Something I've concealed since arriving in Bodie." Vincent's brow furrowed with concern. "What is it?" Hannah took a deep breath. "My name isn't exactly Hannah Larson. It's Hannah Larson Bennett. I was married briefly before coming west. My husband died of typhoid during our journey. My father suggested we present ourselves as father and daughter rather than father-in-law and widowed daughter-in-law." fearing a young widow would attract unwanted attention in a mining town. Understanding dawned in Vincent's eyes. "You're a widow." Hannah nodded, watching his face anxiously. "I've maintained the deception since arriving. Only you know the truth now." Vincent was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. "Did you love him? Your husband?" The question surprised her. "I respected him. We had a companionable marriage arranged by our fathers. We were only together for a year before he fell ill. And you've been alone since?" "Yes." Vincent reached out, taking her hand in his. "Thank you for trusting me with the truth, Hannah. It changes nothing about how I feel about you." Relief washed over her, followed by a surge of emotion she'd been holding at bay for too long. "Vincent, he stepped closer, his eyes intent on hers. "May I kiss you, Hannah?" Her heart stuttered. "Yes." His lips met hers gently at first, then with growing intensity as she responded. His arms encircled her, drawing her against the solid warmth of his chest. Hannah felt something inside her unfurl, a longing she'd denied for too long. When they finally parted, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." Hannah smiled. "I've wanted you to." The admission was freeing. No more pretense, no more denials of what was growing between them. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow night?" Vincent asked. "At the ranch. Mrs. Obregon is an excellent cook, and I'd like to begin our courtship properly." Hannah nodded, happiness bubbling through her. "I'd like that very much." As Vincent helped her onto her horse and they rode side by side toward her cabin, Hannah felt lighter than she had in months. The future, which had seemed so bleak after her father's death, now shimmered with new possibilities. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Hannah's life. Vincent courted her with a mixture of old-fashioned gallantry and straightforward affection that perfectly suited her own nature. They rode together on Sundays, dined at his ranch several evenings a week, and gradually became a recognized couple in Bodie. Wilson's opposition faded as it became clear that Vincent's intentions were honorable, and that the town largely supported their relationship. Hannah continued teaching, now with the full backing of the school board, who had seen the improvements in their children's education. As winter approached, Vincent's visits to her cabin became more frequent. He often brought supplies: firewood, extra provisions, warm blankets, concerned about her facing the harsh mountain winter alone. "You needn't worry so much," Hannah told him one evening as they sat by her fire, sharing a pot of coffee. "I'm quite capable of managing." Vincent smiled, the firelight highlighting the strong planes of his face. "I know you are, but caring for you brings me pleasure. Is it so terrible to allow someone to help you occasionally?" Hannah's expression softened as she remembered those first dire days after her father's death, when Vincent's anonymous gifts had literally saved her life. "No," she admitted. "Not when it's you." Vincent took her hand, his expression growing serious. "Hannah, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes. Winter in these mountains is harsh and this cabin is isolated. If a blizzard comes, you could be cut off for days, even weeks." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I want to ask you to marry me before winter sets in. Not just because of practical concerns, though those are real, but because I love you and I don't want to spend another day apart from you if I can help it." Hannah's breath caught. Though their relationship had been progressing steadily toward this moment, the actual proposal still caught her by surprise. "Vincent, you don't have to answer immediately," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden and you might need time to—" "Yes," Hannah interrupted, squeezing his hand. "My answer is yes." Joy bloomed on Vincent's face. "You're sure? I don't want you to feel pressured by circumstances." Hannah laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "I'm not. I love you, Vincent. I think I have since you left that crate on my porch when I was too proud to ask for help." Vincent gathered her in his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they separated, his eyes were alight with plans. "We can be married next week," he said. "The circuit preacher arrives on Tuesday. We'll need to prepare the ranch house. Your piano should be moved there before the snow makes the roads impassable." Hannah smiled at his enthusiasm. "You've given this some thought, I see." "Only every waking moment," he admitted, "and most of my dreams." The news of their engagement spread quickly through town. Most reactions were positive, with Mrs. Peterson leading the congratulations. "I knew it from the first time I saw you two together," she declared, beaming. "Such a handsome couple you make." Wilson's reaction was cooler but correct. He offered formal congratulations when he encountered them in town, though his eyes remained calculating. "I hope you'll be very happy, Miss Larson," he said, the emphasis on her unmarried status subtle but pointed. "Nash is a fortunate man." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I consider myself equally fortunate." The wedding took place the following Tuesday in the small church at the edge of town. Despite the short notice, most of Bodie turned out for the ceremony. Hannah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Peterson and several other women had helped her alter from her best Sunday dress. Vincent, clean-shaven and dressed in a new suit, waited for her at the altar with an expression of such naked adoration that Hannah felt tears spring to her eyes. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. Their kiss at the conclusion met with cheers and applause from the assembled townspeople. The celebration afterward at the Rocking Inn Ranch House lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than Hannah had seen in one place since leaving Boston. As the last guests departed and they stood alone on the porch of what was now their home, Vincent wrapped his arms around her from behind, drawing her against his chest as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "Happy, Mrs. Nash," he murmured against her hair. Hannah leaned into his embrace, a deep contentment filling her. "More than I ever thought possible." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of happiness. Hannah continued teaching until spring, when she discovered she was expecting their first child. The news delighted Vincent, who immediately began expanding their home to accommodate their growing family. "We'll need a nursery," he declared, sketching plans at the kitchen table while Hannah watched in amusement. "And eventually, more bedrooms. I want a big family if you're agreeable." Hannah laid her hand over his. "I'd like that too, though perhaps we should focus on this one first." Their son, James Jasper Nash, was born on a crisp autumn day almost exactly a year after their wedding. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, a combination that Hannah found utterly enchanting. "He's perfect," Vincent whispered, holding his son for the first time, his voice thick with emotion. "Hannah, he's absolutely perfect." Life settled into a new rhythm. Hannah's days were filled with caring for James and managing their growing household, while Vincent continued expanding the ranch, now one of the most successful in the territory. They complemented each other perfectly, her organizational skills and education balancing his practical knowledge and vision. Their family grew again 2 years later with the birth of their daughter, Elizabeth Marie. By then, the Rocking Inn had become known not only for its fine cattle, but also for the warm hospitality of its mistress. Hannah's piano, once a symbol of her former life and later of her desperate pride, now filled their home with music and joy. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, James and Elizabeth playing at their feet, Vincent took Hannah's hand. "You ever think about those first days?" he asked. "When you were alone and starving and too proud to ask for help?" Hannah smiled, remembering. "Sometimes." I was so determined to manage on my own, so afraid of becoming dependent. Vincent squeezed her hand. And now, she looked at their children, then at the man who had saved her in more ways than one. Now I understand that true independence isn't about refusing help when you need it. It's about choosing who to trust with your vulnerability. "And you trust me?" Vincent asked, his voice suddenly serious. Hannah leaned over to kiss him, pouring years of love and gratitude into the gesture. "With my life, with my heart, with everything I am." As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they'd built together, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate, starving woman too proud to ask for help, to the confident wife and mother she'd become. The cowboy who had left supplies on her porch had given her more than food. He'd given her a future, a family, and a love deeper than she'd ever imagined possible. And in return, she'd given him the home and family he'd never known he wanted until he found her. Together, they'd built something stronger and more enduring than either could have created alone, a testament to the power of pride overcome by love, and the courage to accept help when it's offered with an open heart.